Hello and welcome back to my channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about the books that I hope to read in May. And if you've been following along with these videos, you know I often choose a selection of predetermined books before the month starts. And then I also pick 5 Alphabet Challenge books off of my Kindle backlist using a random letter that I choose from the alphabet at the end of this video. So I choose those books live. But first I do a selection of books that get me close to the 23 books that I want to read each month in the year of 2023. And so it's typically between, 18 to 20 books, and then I add on those 5 at the end of the video. This month I have a theme because I love a theme, and this month I decided to do a deeper dive on series books. One of my goals for 2023 was to get current or to complete at least 23 series throughout the year. And so I've picked, I think 14 different series that I'm going to read books from this month. Some it's several books, some it's one book, some series I'm like one book away from getting current on the series. And I think I can get current on maybe a dozen series if I read through these different books in the month. So let me introduce some of the books that I have already on my list. The first series is one I'm actually pulling over from last month, and this is the Anderson and Costello series by Cara Ramsey. I have the first 3 books as kind of a box set on my Kindle, and so I want to go ahead and read these. The first one is Absolution. The second one is called Singing to the Dead, and the third one is called Dark Water. And I believe these are just kind of like typical detective series. I don't know much about the plots of these books. It's an author I've never read before, and so I just wanted to kind of dive in and see what that series was all about. So this will be a new series for me. I'm also pulling over from last month Trapper Road, which is the 6th book in the Stillhouse Lake series by Rachel Caine. If you watch my TBR video, you'll know I caught up on a bunch of books from this series in April and really am enjoying it. And actually this is co-authored by Rachel Caine and Carrie Ryan, it looks like. So I added that to my list as well. One of the books that I am needing to read the most recent one in is called Fox Creek by William Kent Kruger. This is the 19th book in the Cork O'Connor series. So I'm all caught up except for this most recent book. And this is a series that I have really loved. It's basically about kind of like a small town sheriff who is very tied in with like Native and Indigenous roots, like both within his family experience and also within kind of his community. And that often gets woven into the storyline of the book. This is a series that has been going on for quite some time, and the characters kind of grow along with the series, which I always really love when that happens. So looking forward to getting current on that one. I also decided to pick up the next 2 books in a trilogy that I read the first book of earlier this year, and this is the Curse Breakers series by Bridget Kemmerer. The second in the series is called A Heart So Fierce and Broken. And then the third in the series is called A Vow So Bold and Deadly. And I had read the first one, which I think is called A Curse So Dark and Lonely, if I remember correctly. And that one was great. It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and I really loved this initial part of the series. So I want to read the next 2 in the trilogy. So hoping to get to those this month as well. I also recently started to read the Knock 'Em Out series, which is about a small town, kind of interconnected romances. I read the first book in April, really enjoyed it. And so I'm going to pick up the second one, which is called Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. And I believe this is the first book in the series is about a romance between a man and a woman. And the second book is about the man's brother having a romance. He's a small town sheriff. Lots of small town sheriffs in these series, as I'm realizing. So I'm gonna try to pick up the second one in that series as well. These are kind of lengthy. I think it's almost 600 pages. So it's kind of a deeper or a longer, romance that I'm used to reading. I also want to pick up Solitude Creek by Jeffrey Deaver. This is the 4th book in the Catherine Dance series. I believe this will get me caught up in the series because Deaver has not written a book adding to the series in a while. And this is one that I enjoy. I think that I'm trying to remember, the main character, Catherine Dance, is a body language expert. So that's kind of the hook of the series. It's also kind of a detective mystery series. Jeffrey Deaver is very well known for kind of his forensic detail that he brings into different series that he writes. And so that one will get me current on the Catherine Dance series. So looking forward to reading that. Also hoping to pick up Off the Grid by CJ Box. This is the 16th book in the Joe Pickett series, which somehow I just like randomly skipped over in the middle of reading all the other books in the series. So this is a series that now has, let me take a look at how many books are in this series now. I just read the 23rd book, so I just kind of skipped over this one. So I'm going to go back and read it just because I'm a completist and I like to read all the books in a series. And that is one about a game warden who is also always solving crimes. So definitely falling into the mystery genre for that one too. Okay, picking up another Jeffrey Deaver, would like to get current on the Coulter Shaw series. So this is Hunting Time, which is number 4 in that particular series. And in this one, I think Coulter Shaw, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read the last one, I think he's kind of like a private investigator who's kind of an investigator for hire. And so in this particular book, it looks like he's been hired by an entrepreneur to find his teenage daughter and protect his teenage daughter. He's an expert on tracking missing people. And so this is part of the next entry in the series. So looking forward to that as well. I also added a book called The Match by Harlan Coben. This is number 2 in his Wild series, which I believe right now only has 2 books in it. The first one is called The Boy from the Woods. And this is basically about a man who kind of like grows up. I don't remember the exact details were given in book 1, but basically like he doesn't know his identity and he doesn't know his family of origin. And he has maybe some amnesia or something along those lines where he just doesn't have a good kind of recollection or memory of his younger years. And so in this book, he's like going to try to find his family, and I think he finds his father. So adding on to just the second book in that particular series. Okay, also added to my list a book called Seasonal Fears by Shannon McGuire. This is part of the Alchemical Journeys series. The first book in this series I read in like a day. I loved it. It's called Middle Game, and I really, really enjoyed it. And so this is the follow-up to that book, and I know very little about it in terms of what it's about. I don't know if it kind of follows on the last book, if it's just set in the same world, but it is kind of like a magical fantasy genre book, and I'm looking forward to that one too. All right, next up, I picked up The Binding Room by Nadine Matheson. This is the second book in the Inspector Angelica Henley series. And I believe, it looks like there's a third book in this series coming out in October of this year. So this is kind of a currently running series that's still producing novels and mystery. And in the first book, I know she was going up against a serial killer. In the second book, it says she confronts a series of ritualistic murders in a thriller about race power and the corrupt institutions that threaten us. So definitely another mystery thriller there. Okay, now the next thing I decided to tackle in the month of May is all of the Court of Thorns and Roses books by Sarah J. Maas. Now, like a year ago, maybe a little less than a year ago, I read the first book in this series, which is called A Court of Thorns and Roses. I had very little memory of this, and so I picked it up again, and this was like one of the last books that I read in April. I talk about it in my TBR debrief video if you want to go back and look. And I decided, let me just try to like get through this entire series, because people talk about it all the time. It is beloved, and in the first book I was kind of like, meh, like I don't really understand what all the fuss is about, but I'm like, let me just give the whole series a try. So second book in the series that I'll be picking up is called A Court of Mist and Fury. And these books also get progressively longer as the series goes on, so that'll be kind of interesting as well. Court of Wings and Ruin is number 3. Then there's kind of like a smaller novella. I mean, it's the size of a full novel, but for the sake of this series, it's like a novella because it's not as long. And it's called A Court of Frost and Starlight, and it kind of sits between books 3 and 4. And then the fourth book is called A Court of Silver Flames. Now, I am under the impression, based on some things I've read, that she is still going to be producing books in this series. I'm not sure that this is the end, But right now there are 5 books. And so I'm gonna go ahead and try to read all of them over the course of May and see what I think. That's one of those ones that I just feel like it's overdue. Everyone talks about it all the time. So I'm gonna try to read that if I can. All right, one that I'm really, really super looking forward to is If Only You by Chloe Leese. This is the 6th book in the Bergman Brothers series that I was caught up on until this most recent book came out. And this is a series about brothers and sisters, and each book focuses on one of the siblings and a romance that they have. And one of the things that Chloe Leese is really known for is she writes romance about various forms of like neurodiversity, disability, people who are kind of dealing with these maybe challenges. I mean, you might put it that way. In the books, they're certainly kind of presented as challenges, and finding people to have romances and relationships with while they're kind of being their true and full selves within those challenges. And so it covers issues of like mental health, disability, and neurodiversity in ways that I think are just really interesting. And so I'm going to pick up the 6th book in that series. Okay, and then the last book that I had on my list in kind of this predetermined list was I wanted to continue the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, and so I'm going to pick up The Alloy of Law, and this is book number 4 in that series. Now, the Mistborn series goes beyond the Mistborn trilogy, which I read last year, and my understanding is that the rest of the books in this series are set in the world that he has created around this concept of being Mistborn, but they're not like following on the timeline or the storyline of what happened in the first 3 books. So it's kind of like you're returning to something that's somewhat familiar, but then there's like new characters, new world. And I understand that this one is kind of like a Western from what I've heard and what I've read. So I thought it would be fun to pick that one up as well. So a ton of different series that I'm going to be trying out in the month of May. I'm actually really looking forward to these. And next up, let me go ahead and draw a letter that I can choose for my alphabet challenge. And let me go ahead and pull up my Kindle here so that I'm ready to take a look when I know what letter I'm going to pick. So pulling out my trusty container. And I feel like I'm kind of running out of letters because I've actually used up a bunch of them because I did this last year too. So let's see what's left and what letter I choose. And the letter I have picked is W. All right, so let's take a look on my Kindle, and I'm just organizing everything alphabetically, and I've also filtered it for things that are unread, just so it kind of makes it a little bit easier for me to look at. All right, so let me just take a look here and see if there's any obvious ones that kind of jump out at me that I definitely know I want to be reading here. All right, some really good things to choose from. Actually, quite a few that are falling into this letter. Okay, so the first one that I'm gonna pick here, oh, there's a bunch. Okay, it just keeps going. I'm like trying to figure out. Okay, there's a ton. Okay, so first one I'm going to pick out is a book called Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This is one that I've just heard a ton about. I think it plays with time quite a bit from what I understand. It either jumps back and forth in time or it has some kind of element of that. And I always like books that fall into that category. So I am going to pick out that one first. The next one I'm going to choose, let's see. There are just a bunch of really good ones here. I'm going to pick Winter Garden by Kristen Hanna. I'm trying to work my way through Kristen Hanna's backlist. And so that one looks like it could be interesting to me. So let me go ahead and add this one to my reading up next category. This helps me to remember which ones I actually picked. So I'm going to move it into the right category here. Okay, so that's 2. And let's see here. I'm gonna pick Who is Maud Dixon, which is by Alexandra Andrews. And I think this is something about like editing and writing. Let me look at the book details. I feel like it's like a kind of a mistaken identity book, if I remember. So, okay, quick synopsis says, Florence Darrow has always felt she was destined for greatness, but after a disastrous affair with her married boss, she starts to doubt herself. All that changes when she sets off for Morocco with her new boss, the celebrated but reclusive author Maud Dixon. Amid the colorful streets of Marrakesh and the windswept beaches of the coast, Florence begins to feel she's leading the sort of interesting cosmopolitan life she deserves. But when she wakes up in the hospital after a terrible car accident with no memory of the previous night and no sign of Maud, a dangerous idea begins to take form. Okay, so I think she begins to like take over this person's identity, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to add who is Maud Dixon to my next up list as well. All right, let's see here. So I need a couple more. All right, I'm also gonna pick a book called We Were Never Here by Andrea Bartz. This is also one that I can't remember what it's about, but I've heard, really good things about it. Let's see what it says. All right, so it says a backpacking trip has deadly consequences in this eerie psychological thriller that has his Hitchcockian tension and possibly the best pair of female leads since Thelma and Louise. All right, sold. That one's pretty easy. So let's add that to the list as well. And let's see, one more. I think I'm gonna pick, I don't know much about this one, as is a theme with many of these books. It's called We Could Be Heroes by Mike Chen. And I believe this might be about superheroes. And I've heard also really good things about this. Let's see. So quick synopsis says, Jamie woke up in an empty apartment with no memory and only a few clues to his identity, but with the ability to read and erase other people's memories, a power he uses to hold up banks to buy coffee, cat food, and books. Zoe is also searching for her past and using her abilities of speed and strength to deliver fast food, and she'll occasionally put on a cool suit and beat up bad guys if she feels like it. When the arch rivals meet in a memory loss support group, they realize the only way to reveal their hidden past might be through each other, and they uncover an ongoing threat. And much more is at stake than their fragile friendship. So yes, this does sound like it is about superheroes, and that sounds interesting to me. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to my next up list as well. So I believe those are my 5. Let me go back to my collection here. All right, so I've got Winter Garden, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, Who is Maud Dixon, We Were Never Here, and We Could Be Heroes for my Alphabet Challenge books that I'm going to be reading in the month of May. Those will be, I think, a nice break because none of those, from what I can tell, are series books. So I'm going to have a ton of series that hopefully I'll make a great progress on throughout the month, and then these 5 books to pick up as well. Feel free to check back at the end of the month to see how far I'm able to get in the month of May, and until then, happy reading.